Super Mario Sunshine was the first game I ever played. I was 3 years old and my family was going to church. The church I attended had a preschool-like area for young tykes to play around in. In the corner of the room, they had a gaming setup for kids to play some video games so that the teachers could just not bother with us and take some painkillers to numb the headache from all the screaming. You know the teacher from the first grade series of Junie B. Jones? It was like that. I never really got to play since whenever I showed up, there'd always be kids on it, so the opportunity just never really presented itself. But one fateful day, when I came in, miraculously, no one was there. For the first time, I got to sit down and actually play a video game for once in my life. And that game was Super Mario Sunshine. I remember Mario floating in water with a town completely flooded. I explored a bit, unsure exactly what to do. I somehow made it to the top of this building and saw this large thing covered in paint. After about 15 minutes of aimlessly wandering, I got bored, put the game down to do something else, and I didn't touch Mario Sunshine for nearly 20 fucking years. Between that time, I completed Mario 64 DS, Galaxy, Galaxy 2, Mario 3D World, Mario 64, Mario Odyssey, Bowser's Fury, and Mario 3D Land in that order. And when I say complete, I mean 100%. I 100%ed every Mario game except for Mario Sunshine at that point. This was because Nintendo never really re-released GameCube games for whatever reason. I don't know why. The Wii U Virtual Console pretty much had every console under the sun: NES, SNES, 64, Game Boy, Game Boy Advance, Nintendo DS, and even Wii games. Why the hell did they skip GameCube? Was it because emulating it was difficult? That can't be it. Nintendo Wii was just two GameCubes stuck together, and that was already backwards compatible with the GameCube, so what the hell? It wasn't until Mario 3D All-Stars on Switch when Mario Sunshine was finally re-released, meaning I could finally complete it. I find it funny that the first game I ever played would be the last Mario game I ever completed. It's funny how things work out like that. That being said, I have no attachment to this game at all. This whole thing is poetic, but I'm illiterate, so that means very little to me. I just wanted to play it since I've heard a lot about this game over the years, how it's the black sheep of the franchise because it's different. I wanted to play it for myself to really get a grasp on what all the discussion was about. And now that I've played it 100% completion, I have a lot of thoughts. Thoughts that I have to share in a YouTube video because I can't keep them to myself. I gotta bug somebody about it, so might as well make it you. Before we jump into it, I think I should bring up the fact that this game was rushed. Okay, some history. We all know about like Mario 128, right? There's gonna be a sequel to Mario 64, but for multiple reasons, it ran into development hell, leading to its cancellation. The process went on forever, and when the GameCube rolled around, Nintendo was like, shit, we need a new Mario game. Miyamoto has flipped the table again. Oh god, what are we gonna do? So they got this guy, Yoshiaki Koizumi, to direct the next Mario game. He was actually the assistant director on Mario 64 and also the lead developer on Majora's Mask. So since he has experience in both directing and also made a game in quick rush time by sacrificing his home life, no doubt, they sat him down and made him the director of Mario Sunshine and got him to make it in as little time as possible. Yeah, even though it's been like 6 years since Mario 64, the development of Mario Sunshine only began in like 2001, meaning that had about 2.5 years of development or so. That's not a very long time. They had to reuse a lot of mission ideas throughout the game. That's why there's 240 blue coins scattered everywhere. Why there's only 7 original levels in the game rather than the 15 that were in Mario 64. Why it's super glitchy. I'm bringing this up now since a lot of my problems I have with this game are most likely result from this rushed development. It's kind of interesting making a review on these kind of games since a lot of the problems that people point out were probably already known by the developers when the game was being made, but they didn't really have time to fix it. It's like when you're at work but morning crew didn't do their job, so you had to pick up the slack, and then when you come into work the next day, they chastise you for not getting anything done. Of course, it doesn't change the fact that these issues are issues. I can't just ignore them, especially when they give me a goddamn seizure. I guess it doesn't even really matter. I don't know why I'm saying this. It's not like Koizumi is gonna watch this and just start fucking crying. Okay, the very first thing I actually want to talk about with this game is the story. I know it seems a little pointless since it's a Mario story. It's very simplistic. Like, the instructions to make a peanut butter sandwich is more complicated. But Mario Sunshine does something very different compared to all the other Mario games. It actually has, like, cutscenes and voice acting and a continuous plot that advances as the course of the game does. Okay, well, that last point kind of has quotes around it, but whatever. I imagine the reason they went in this direction is because when Mario 64 was released, it was like a massive showcase of Mario's jump into 3D and his new ability to be able to move towards you. But it's clear that with that game, making Mario work in 3D was the main priority. And since the console had its limitations, it was just all focused on just making the game work. Now that this is on the GameCube with more power and more experience about 3D, they wanted to make everything bigger, better, grander. They got voice actors, made cutscenes to really impress the audience with their awesome presentation. The problem is that despite all this effort to make the story presentation better, the actual storytelling is just as simplistic as it's ever been. Peach gets kidnapped, you gotta go save her. Oh my gosh, who could have seen that coming? Not Helen Keller, because, you know, she's dead. Any extra story they do have is quite frankly very stupid. Like Mario shows up on the island and then they just immediately arrest him because some doppelganger that shared his silhouette was painting graffiti everywhere. Mario just got here. It's like how in Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic gets confused for Shadow. Like, why? Is it because they're both hedgehogs? I guess there aren't a whole lot of speedy hedgehogs in that world, so maybe they just thought Sonic was like doing blackface or something. But what's Sunshine's excuse? It makes all the cutscenes super uninteresting to watch since nothing really happens in them. It doesn't help that you can't skip them, so you just gotta wait for the game to take 5 minutes for Peach to get kidnapped when in the previous game she was already taken before I even booted up the game. Say what you will about Sonic Adventure Story, but it was a story that needed the cutscenes to properly tell it. There was a lot more done here than in previous games that they never really did before. It was grand, it was ambitious. The story had like a lot of moving parts, different perspectives. There was a lot of character motive and character growth. Things actually happen in the story. It might look a little silly, but things are happening. That's what's important. The most interesting thing that this game does is that it makes actual story connections with other games, most specifically Luigi's Mansion. Professor Egad was the one that created the paintbrush Junior uses, as well as Flood himself. It's pretty cool. That's never really happened in Mario games before, really since. Although I can kinda understand why they don't. Like, despite the connection between Egad and the inventions, they don't really do anything with that. So if you never played Luigi's Mansion, a moment like this where Bowser Jr. exclaims that he stole it from an old man in a white coat and Flood reacting to that information would mean nothing to you. Hell, it might even confuse you, since you might think that this will become a major element later in the game, think this old man will become plot important somehow, but then he just never does. I suppose the game does have one other thing going on for it, and that being Bowser Jr. He debuted in this game and was masquerading as Mario to get him in trouble, so he has an easier time to get his hands on Peach. And by the end of the game, Bowser and Jr. have this kind of sweet moment. It's small, but it's something. Another character that debuted in this game is Toadsworth. There's not much to say about him here. He's like Peach's head advisor or something, but he doesn't really serve a plot purpose. He's just kind of here. But after we entered like the Wii era, he kind of just disappeared. His last game appearance was in Mario and Luigi's Bowser's Inside Story plus Bowser Jr.'s Journey. And the last non-remake game he appeared in was Mario and Luigi Dream Team. And the last game he appeared before that was Bowser's Inside Story. He was only appearing in the RPG spin-off series for a while. He was a cool character. He was kind of like a sort of father figure to Peach, so why is he gone? I do have a couple of theories as to why. The first one is that over the years, Nintendo wanted a lot of their characters and species to be more consistent, so they started putting restrictions on what a Toad needs to look like. Like, they always need to be short and stubby, they always have to have specific colors on their head, they can only wear certain clothes, they can't be Arabic. Since Toadsworth probably breaks some internal rules they got going on, he got chucked aside. Now, I understand wanting to keep your characters and species consistent, but I feel like getting rid of Toadsworth is going a little too far. Like, we can have some unique looking Toads. He doesn't even look all that different, he's just like an old Toad. Toadette can continue to exist, why not Toadsworth? My second theory is that he got assassinated. They really wanted to wow the audience with the GameCube by going, look at this. This is what Mario games can be like now. But it's also like they really didn't want to stray too far from the Peach getting kidnapped plot. So what we're left with is the equivalent of those 5-paragraph essays where the student is overly redundant and stretches out the thesis as much as they possibly can to reach the fucking character limit. It's purely for spectacle, but since we're in the future, it's less awe-inspiring and more like watching your grandpa trying to do a cartwheel and breaking his hip. Alright, let's get into the actual game now. This strip is basically the area that we're gonna get used to the controls in a safe environment. Your basic 3D platforming thing. And you'll see that many of your moves from Mario 64 are here. He could do a double jump, triple jump, side somersault, ground pound, dive. There are some moves though that are just completely absent. Why? Did they take a vacation? You can't do a backflip. In fact, you can't crouch at all. Mario refuses to bend his legs. The long jump is also gone, which really sucks since that was one of his best moves in Mario 64. It can help you cross large gaps like your Evil Knievel, but without the bike and the broken bones. It was probably removed because of the new gimmick of the game, Flood. Oh, they aren't on vacation. They got fired. He's a little water device that, shoots out water. You see, in this game, you play as a janitor, spraying down paint and ink to clear paths and such. You can spray water as an attack, as well as hover for a short time. Many of the enemies interact differently from Flood, so you'll need to take that into consideration when getting them wet. Like these turtle dudes, they throw your shell at you and you need to spray to stun them, so when the shell comes back, they get their own self-imposed electric chair. Although because the enemies now have this extra step to take them out, you're more likely to just ignore them since they aren't really an obstacle anyway. Just stand there, attack once and call it a day. Gotta clock out early, don't want to miss out on the game. The other part of Flood is hovering. The hover is very interesting because there aren't actually a whole lot of moments where it's required. Many jumps in the game can just be done by regular jumping, and Mario has a lot of options to ascend upward, so it's more just immersive way to help correct jumps or even skip certain parts of the level if you really time it well. It's great. And you'll really need those corrections since Mario controls a bit differently than he did in Mario 64. Unlike in that game where he felt somewhat stiff and heavy, here he's the loosest he's ever been. So loose that he's a little difficult to control sometimes. Like his somersault, the time to pull this off is so wide that you'll be doing it by accident plenty of times throughout the game. Because even when it looks like he should be out of that window of opportunity, he's not. Like, Jesus, Mario, the window doesn't need to be open that long. You're letting the cold air in. You want to get sick? Shows up to fight Bowser and he just looks like he's dying. It's most notable in these pure platforming stages where you don't have FLUDD. They can be a little difficult to control due to Mario's loosey-goosey controls. It's not uncommon that I found myself careening off a cliff because of it. You know, in a way, FLUDD kind of seems like a very natural idea for something like Mario. His whole thing's about jumping, so giving him a device that makes him float could lead to some interesting and unique platforming. I really like FLUDD. Later, we get 2 new abilities for him that's used for some missions, which I'll go over when they become relevant. The airstrip. You know, this place lets you get accustomed to controls, run around, jump a bit, go into the water, and you're able to quickly figure out that the swimming controls are garbage. You see, unlike Mario 64 where you just tilt the stick into where you want to go and you swim in that direction, here you press one button to descend downward and another button to ascend and swim forward. It's super awkward and not graceful at all. Now, to be honest, it's not really that big of a deal since despite being on a tropical island, aside from a couple missions, there aren't really any moments where swimming is the main focus. Like if it is, it's very basic, like collecting red coins and things like that. And any stage that does give you underwater travel, it gives you a completely different control scheme where you use FLUDD to basically fly. But I just think it would have been better if they just kept the way it was controlled from Mario 64. Not only that, but they could have done something cool like using FLUDD to propel yourself in all directions and not just upward. I don't like going in the water. It's also a pain in the ass to get out. It feels like Mario can't swim and is constantly drowning. Let's talk about the visual design next because, yeah, why not? You think I got a plan when it comes to my points? I'm just writing as I go. I really enjoy the aesthetics of this game. I was always a sucker for the beach. I find it very relaxing and the whole game follows this sense of theming. It's very unique for Mario since normally he'll just travel to random locations with no sense of consistency whatsoever. Like one moment you're in the desert, next you're in the third layer of hell, next you're in the worst goddamn cordon maze you've ever been a part of. But here you're always on the same island, so we explore more unique environments, like a harbor, an amusement park, you could travel to a cliffside with a waterfall, a hotel. I really enjoy it. The enemies are also very different compared to previous ones. Instead of Goombas or Koopas, you got things like electric Koopas or Stroll and Stew. He do be Stroll, and don't let anyone tell you that he's not, because if they do, I will kill them. They're kind of like tropical versions of the enemies we know, because, you know, when I think of a tropical island, the first thing I think of is electrocution. Another thing I really enjoy is how all the areas are connected. Like on Bianco Hills, if you look down the cliff, you can actually see Rico Harbor in the distance. In Delfino Plaza, you can see Pinna Park and vice versa. It really makes the whole island feel real. Double Dash did this too, where you can see other tracks from the one you're driving on. I wonder why they stopped doing that. Like, they still did it sometimes, like on Wii Sports Resort, but imagine being able to see other galaxies in Super Mario Galaxy. Look, it's good egg. The entire vibe of this game is just very relaxed. Like how Sirena Beach takes place at sunset with some relaxing tropical music playing. It's so cozy. Like if this place was real, I would want to visit it. Take some family and friends, it'd be nice. I mentioned the music, so let's quickly go over it real fast. The music in this game was composed by Koji Kondo, as well as Shinibu Nagata. Now, since this game shares a theme of beaches throughout the whole adventure, much of the music reflects that. You know, you're not going to be hearing like hard rock where it wouldn't really fit. I can't really call out specifics since I'm no music expert, but they definitely feel tropical. Koji Kondo and Shinibu Nagata definitely had like different ways how they tackled the music in this game. Kondo's music is much more lively and energetic, pretty much what you would expect from the man, while Nagata's music is a little more low-key. I wouldn't call it atmospheric, but it's definitely a lot calmer compared to Kondo. I really like both. It's a nice mixture that I think fits well. Like Delfino Plaza is supposed to be a fun, lively town, so having the music be more energetic fits, while the hotel is a place to wind down and relax. It's at a sunset, so having music where it's much more subtle is a perfect fit. It's all very well thought out. It's definitely one of the more unique soundtracks in Mario, which I think helps make it stand out. But that's also probably because I'm a sucker for anything beach aesthetic. One of my favorite tracks ever is Beach Bowl Galaxy. It's just so calming, and this game is basically all that. I love it. Alright, I've stalled long enough. Let's just actually start talking about the levels. I want to start off with discussing how the levels are structured. Unlike Mario 64, you can't collect the shines in any order you wish. When you pick a mission, that's the shine you're going for. You also can't do them out of order. If you want to do mission 3, you have to complete mission 2 first. On paper, this sounds awful. It completely removes the freedom that you had in the first game of letting you explore and come across missions at your own pace. The game does make up for this though. Each mission is changed and rearranged to better fit whatever the goal is. The first mission of Bianco Hills has this area with the palm trees covered in goop, and you need to clear it out. In episode 5, Petey is sleeping over by this cliff, and when you wake him up, he starts flying all over the town. In episode 6, the lake becomes gross and polluted, forcing you to have to use the leaf to navigate. Not every episode changes drastically, and when it doesn't, it's usually just you being forced to explore a different area of the level. It fixes one of the biggest issues of Mario 64, where some levels would have you do the same thing over and over again, like a walk to a day job. In Mario Sunshine, since the episodes change, you're doing something different each time you enter a mission. While on the surface it seems very similar to Mario 64, the actual execution is much more similar to Galaxy, which handled how it did its levels in a very similar manner. Many levels also take this setup and tell little mini stories in them. In Gelato Beach, you have this one mission where Wiggler's sleeping on the tower and you have to get it off by burning it with light. Do you think as a kid Mario set ants on fire with a magnifying glass? In the next mission, the Wiggler is now going on a rampage and you have to take him out to help the citizens. And then the mission after that, the egg it was sitting on the top of the building hatches, and now there's a mission related to that. Noki Bay has its own story where the lake is polluted, and you spend many of the missions doing different things to try to solve the issue. Pianta Village, these guys are just trying to enjoy themselves, but horrible things keep happening to them. Like, you'd think after a while these guys would move somewhere else. Like, why do people live in Florida? It's a constant hazard. Are they stupid? But after you do all the missions, the final one is just them celebrating after problems have finally been resolved. It really makes these places feel much more real and alive, and gives it personality. Like in Mario 64, it kind of feels like you're walking through ancient ruins. Places that may have had life in them at one point, but have since long been abandoned and forgotten. Originally, I was going to just start talking about the levels in order, but then I discovered just how many repeat type missions there are in this game. There's plenty of secret levels and red coins, Shadow Mario chases, plenty of bosses are reused. So instead of just repeating myself like several times as I go over each missions that are very similar with one another, I'm just going to bundle them all together and just talk about them in one fell swoop. I feel like that's a lot simpler. Let's start with the secret levels. If an episode title has secret in it, then it'll involve you traveling to these kind of platforming fever dreams where flood's taken away from you, so you have to go through it much more traditionally. Every level has one or two of these in them, so you'll be going through a lot of platforming challenges. You have ones that are very simple, maneuvering around moving blocks, like you're in a crowded mall, flipping platforms, sand blocks that disappear from under your feet when you walk over them. A couple of them have this rotating block, which really stresses me out. Mario Sunshine is very lax when it comes to slope, like you could stand on a 70-degree angle and it still lets you cling on it like a horse. So that makes it a little easier, but it's still pretty intense. It's like you're trying to walk on ice. You never feel completely secure, and then you slip and fall and smash your face in the ice and break your nose. And then after all those ones, you get the ones in Noki Bay and Sirena Beach, which take the elements from all the previous challenges you did and combine them all together into one, especially Noki Bay's, which is like one big final obstacle course. It's the most in-depth out of all the secret levels. Weirdly enough though, that's actually not the final one. It's the one in Pianta Village, where you have to talk to these guys and they'll chuck you across gaps. Oh, I'm a fuckster. It's all about talking to them in the right time. It's weird. You have to position yourself just right. You got ones with different sizes that throw you different distances. Ones surrounded by enemies. It's odd, but I kind of like it. It's really unique, and having Mario get chucked across the screen is quite fun to see. I wish I could chuck Italians. I wouldn't stop. Now, to enter these secret levels, the game requires you to try to figure out how to get to them. They are secret levels after all. There's no billboard advertisement for these things. In Bianco's Hills, the lake gets all dirty, so you can't swim in it, so you have to use the leaf to make your way to the waterfall. The second one, you have to make your way up to this cliff by using this singular tightrope. In Sirena Beach, you have to climb up these boos and make it to the top of this pole and enter this thing's mouth. 4. The one in Pinna Park is especially weird. You gotta get Yoshi over here and then take him to this merry-go-round, and then you just get taken to the level by passing out, I guess. You know, the animal and plant life in this game is really weird. Like, does Mario eat Yoshis? Are they like a delicacy? Are mushroom and flowers like sentient and are like aware of what's going on? Do they like getting eaten? Do they want to get eaten? Does the mushroom have depression? Gotta go to the mushroom therapist and get mushroom therapy. My favorite part about these is that when you re-enter the level, you actually get to keep FLUDD, which completely breaks these levels in half. Like in the Chuckster one, you don't have to get flung haphazardly. You can just fly across. I really like it when games do this. Sometimes it's fun to break a level in half with a mechanic they weren't designed for. Like in Monkey Ball Banana Mania, you can jump if you choose to. And gosh, some of these levels that are really hard become fucking cakewalks after that. It's crazy. The secret levels with FLUDDs are also red coin missions, so it's not like you just have to beat the level again. missions. It wants you to try to use Flood to get some of the red coins that are more out there. Admittedly, they are fun on more novelty's sake, like you still are just kind of going through the same level again. And since there's 10 of these things, by the time you're doing the final ones, it can be a little tiring. It doesn't help that re-entering the level isn't changed at all. You're just doing the exact same thing. It's not that big of a deal for something like Gelato Beach where you can just immediately jump into it, but for something like Sirena Beaches, it can be a real big pain in the ass. It's easily the worst one in the whole game. You have to spray these 2 slot machines until eventually, after God knows how long, you finally get the 777s. And when you get those 2 out of the way, you have to spray these question mark tiles to flip them to get them to show the shine. But if your water even slightly scrapes one, it will flip. Asking for perfect precision with what's essentially a water gun is like trying to thread a needle in a goddamn earthquake. Like, Jesus, I just want to play a video game, not trade my will to live. It's like real gambling. And you gotta do this twice. Once you finally get through it, all your energy is just drained out of you. Gotta take a nice nap after that. But then you oversleep and wake up feeling even worse. Since I just brought up red coins, I guess now would be the perfect segue into talking about that. And then the blue coins. And the 100 coin missions. You know, I'll just talk about all the coin shit all at once. This game loves its coins. Every stage has a red coin mission, some even have 2. All the secret levels have their own red coin missions. Some secret shines in Delfino Plaza are red coin missions. There are 240 blue coins, and every level plus Delfino Plaza has a 100 coin mission. Like, what, a fucking war you make this game? Let's go ahead and start with the blue coins. These things are scattered everywhere. It's like one big scavenger hunt. Each level has 25 blue coins with 20 more in the plaza and 10 more in Corona Mountain. In total, there's 240 of these things, which gets you about 24 shine sprites. That's about like 1/5 of the whole game dedicated to these things. Unlike the red coins, the blue coins can be collected at any time in any mission, are pretty consistent between levels. Why the fuck is there an asterisk? They're located in more discrete spots, like ones you really have to go out of your way to get to, or you have to be clever in finding them, like spraying a certain object that seems like it could have something. Some of these are like mini challenges where you spray a spot and then you have to make a mad dash to where the coin appears. It really encourages you to explore these levels to the fullest and help you expand your knowledge of where you can go and what you can accomplish with Flood. There are times where the blue coins have some missions that they don't appear in, but most of the time it makes sense. Like if there's an area or event that's only accessible during a certain mission, like the casino, the hotel, or this little shopping area in Rico Harbor that appears in Mission 8, then it makes sense. It might be a little annoying, but if you're missing a blue coin, then it shouldn't be too hard to figure out which mission it should be in. But that's where the asterisk comes in. There are a couple rare exceptions that ultimately bring the whole blue coin hunting thing down entirely. Take this one under the bridge in Bianco Hills, for example. Now, it not appearing in the first mission makes sense since the bridge is gone in that one. But the second one, where the bridge is fine, the coin is still not there for some reason. It's only in the third mission when the blue coin finally shows up. Hello, I have to pause the video real fast. Turns out I got the missions that the blue coin appears in wrong. It doesn't appear for the first 4 missions in its entirety. It only appears in the 5th mission. I'm bringing this up because after this point, I made like a whole theory that the reason why the blue coin was missing was because the first 2 missions were just kind of linked together, so the developers forgot to make it available in the second mission. But after reviewing the footage and not realizing that's the case, that theory kind of got shot. So yeah, I have no idea why that blue coin doesn't appear or why some other blue coins don't appear. They just kind of don't. But yeah, it just kind of reaffirms the whole thing that those couple exceptions really ruined the whole blue coin experience. There's only a few that are like this, but that's a few too many. There's also just too many of them. 240, that's a lot. And this game doesn't really have a proper way to really track them all. After beating the game, you can see how many you collected in a level. I don't know why that's only available after beating the game, and it only tells you how many you had, not how many there are left. So if you didn't know that they were consistent between levels, like I imagine many kids didn't, this was pretty much next to useless. It just makes it all tiring by the end. When I collected all my shine sprites, I only had a little over half of these things. And I was keeping my eyes out for them too. I wasn't neglecting them like I do my taxes. So the final hours of recording were just me hunting these things down. It doesn't help that some of these locations just aren't really the best to explore, like Noki Bay here. Hell, I think even the developers knew this, because for the red coin mission here, instead of placing them across the area like every other level, they just shove you in this bottle and collect the coins in an entirely new place separate from Noki Bay. It definitely makes it my least favorite level to collect these things. What the shit? What the fuck was that? That'd be like if you were playing Crash Bandicoot, and when you collected a gem, your dad came to the room and started beating you. On the opposite end of the color wheel, you have the red coins. They function almost identically to Mario 64. There's 8 of them scattered throughout the levels, and you must collect them all to get the shine. You know, sometimes I wonder if the stars and shines Mario collects actually have the same properties as real stars. I hope not. If they are, that would mean Mario is like filled with so much radiation from touching these things. He's gonna die. Unlike Mario 64 though, you can't collect them whenever you want. They're tied to specific missions now. I really like this change. Red coins in 64 were there to kind of push your exploration and make you look in every nook and cranny for these things. But now that we have the blue coins, which basically serve the same purpose, they changed it so that red coins are now more of a way to emphasize a unique challenge. Like in Rico Harbor, where it's about surfing on a blooper and collecting these red coins by jumping up at them, trying not to mess up. Sirena Beach gives you a time limit to try to find them all in this maze of a hotel. They showed the last one in a toilet. Noki Bay's red mission, as I already mentioned, sends you to an entirely new location rather than scaling the mountain. And its second one sends you deep underwater, where they're like in this fish and they like to scatter, and it's the most tedious thing in the world to collect. You get the point. It's not just about exploring anymore. I mean, some of them are, like the one in Pianta Village or Pinna Park, but those are more exceptions than anything. There's also plenty of red coin missions in like the hidden levels around Delfino Plaza, but I think I'll save those for later since they're more unique and, infamous compared to these other ones. Despite having a lot of them, they do a good job making each one unique, so it feels like you're actually doing something different each time. The only point where it starts to feel tiring is in the previously mentioned revisits of the secret levels, but that's really it. The red coin missions I feel are really well handled here. The final coin related stars are the 100 coin missions, but unlike the red coin ones where they felt more well thought out and designed, or how the blue coin missions felt like they encourage you to explore as much as you can, the 100 coin missions kind of just feel like a big afterthought. Not a single one of these were fun. Mario 64 already had a problem where sometimes you'd find yourself in a position where you can't collect 100 coins. But here it's even worse. There's some missions where it's just straight up impossible since there aren't 100 coins in the level. What in the blue fuck? Some of them boil down to finding a farming spot and just wait around a bit. Thrilling. It's like a roller coaster that's going half a mile an hour, like in a desert. During the summer. The idea is probably to have players thoroughly explore the levels, but the red coin missions and the blue coin missions especially already did that, so it just makes them very redundant. None of these were fun. The next repeating mission type is Shadow Mario. You have to hunt this bastard down in every 7th mission of the game. Not only that, but every time something unlocks like Yoshi or one of the flood packs, you also have to chase him down to get those. So you chase him down once with Peach, 3 more times for Yoshi and the 2 flood packs, and then of course the 7 levels. That's 11 times you're chasing him throughout the game, and they don't really change between each other. I mean, some of them can be different. In Pianta Village, he leaves a trail of fire goo, which makes chasing him down a little difficult. In Sirena Beach, there are these clones everywhere, which I guess is kind of interesting.
Are you Squidward?
No.
Are you Squidward? No.
But things like that are kind of negligible. It still boils down to just chase him and spray him. Also, I feel like the hit detection is all kinds of jank. There's times where I swear I'm hitting him, but the game just says no. It's like when you're playing tag with that one kid. Even if you planted your whole hand on them, they're like, you didn't tag me, fuck you. Yes, I did. It'd be fine if they were used sparingly or did more to differentiate themselves from one another, but they don't, so it's very underwhelming. Alright, we finally got all of the kind of repeated mission types out of the way. There's quite a lot of them. As I mentioned before, this game was really rushed, so the developers needed to find a way to get a lot more missions with a lot less. Now that sounds like it would be boring as fuck, but for the most part they did a pretty good job masking it. For one, you rarely do these kind of missions back to back, so it gives you time to kind of breathe in between the missions. And as I mentioned, the structure of the game is able to make 2 similar missions feel fairly different just by how they build the level around it. Speaking of levels, let's actually start talking about those now. I'm 28 minutes into this and I'm only now just starting to talk about the levels. Jeez. Bianco Hills is the first real level of the game. I'm probably just gonna skim over this one real quick since most of the missions in it are ones we already covered in the group of levels earlier. It only has 3 missions that are entirely unique to itself, and even then they all have to do with pissing in the mouth of a giant plant. The missions are all set up to let you use FLUDD in different ways they'll be used throughout the game. The first mission has the second area that's beyond this wall that's completely covered in shit, letting the player clean it up using FLUDD. The second mission has you climb up this windmill, using FLUDD to hover and maneuver yourself around deadly vines. The third mission is the first secret level, forcing you to use the tight ropes that appear occasionally throughout the game. The sixth mission teaches you about like being able to move stuff on water while you're on it, by using FLUDD as kind of like a way to push yourself. The fourth and eighth missions are both red coins, but I've already gone over those, so I don't really need to repeat myself. Oh, come on, don't look at me like that. Oh, okay, I'll explain it one more time, just for you. Red coins are a mechanic returning from Mario 64. You must collect 8 of them and you'll be rewarded with a shine. Unlike Mario 64, where they're collectible at any time, here, the mission is dedicated to them, allowing them to be more interesting, like collecting them while riding on a blooper. There are plenty, and overall a general improvement over Mario 64. Alright there, I explained it again. Are you happy? Okay, have a lollipop. The 5th mission is the first time you're able to use the rocket nozzle to help you reach the cliffside where Petey is. There's also a moment where you have to like wake him up using these pink things that latch on the flood and like shoot at him, but those aren't really used at any other point in the game except for maybe like one other moment? I can't remember. I will say, it's pretty interesting that this is only one of 2 missions that take place in the village. You'd think with it being the first thing the player sees, they would make the first mission take place here, as the player would naturally want to explore it. Maybe they intentionally didn't do that because they wanted players to discover the blue coins in this way. By having the village just be a completely empty and safe environment for the first 2 missions, players will be able to come across these things very naturally and learn about them early on. So when they're hit with the save prompts when collecting them, the player knows that they're pretty important to keep an eye out for them. The village is also just a really nice way to push Flood's abilities to see what you can do. Trying to get from one building to another, spraying these fans. There's even a nice river here to fill your tank. I will say though, functionally as a village, it's pretty shit. Like, what are the crops? Any stores at all? What the fuck do these guys eat? I guess the only real thing left to talk about is Petey himself. He's just kind of a slightly more complex version of the goopy piranha plants we fought before. In fact, before ever reaching Petey, we already fought these things like 3 times. And Petey doesn't really differentiate them at all, aside from having to ground pound his belly button and he barfs at us. I mean, he flies at one point, but like so does Mario, so I'm not impressed. I will say though, I really enjoy his design. Nintendo's always done this where they like take a normal enemy and made them bigger, but with Petey, they changed a lot from like a typical piranha plant, but it's still clear that he is one. He has these cool petals around his head and a cute little body. He's a lot like Bowser, a character that deviated a lot from the normal Koopa design, but still clearly is part of the same species. I can see why Petey was used in spin-offs for a while. He had such a distinct design. Overall, it's a great introductory level. I don't think it's as good as like Mario 64's Bomb on Battlefield, which is just like perfectly constructed level from top to bottom, but it still accomplishes a lot that a first level should. You know, just like introducing mechanics and stuff that the player will be utilizing throughout the rest of the game. Rico Harbor is the next stage of the game. This is the part where they introduce grates into the mix that you can climb and hang from. You can smack it to kill enemies and even flip certain parts of the grates. But the way it's handled is very annoying. To smack the grate, it's a different button depending on whether you're clinging on a wall or hanging from a ceiling. I can't tell you how many times I wanted to smack a grate, but instead I let go and plummet to my death. Why is it this way? It's not too bad here since you're mostly just over water, but in a later level, it demands you do this over a bottomless pit, so you better remember the correct button. Idiot. Why didn't they just make it the same button? It'd be like if you were playing Sonic, but to make him run, you had to control each leg individually like it's fucking Quap. This first episode ends with Gooper Blooper. You have to stomp on his limbs and tear them off so that he can't defend himself, so you have to take its nose and fucking launch the thing. The whole concept to take this guy down is very disturbing, and Nintendo knew this. Whenever you tear a limb, it flails wildly all over the place and makes these disgusting sounds. I can't imagine how many kids were frightened by this. I remember when I was playing Super Paper Mario and reaching this point in hell where you had to sink in water and these bony arms are stretching at you trying to grab you while this creepy music played. It scared me. I had nightmares. Anyway, most of the shines after that had the water all nice and clean, where some of the missions take place, the main one being this squid surfing one. You can pick a squid that has different speeds and you have to collect 8 red coins. I encountered a weird problem though, that after the shine appeared, the camera would glitch out and go all spastic, making getting the shine basically impossible. Now for the most part, the camera in Mario Sunshine is actually pretty fine. This was the first Mario game that allowed complete control over the camera, since this released on the GameCube and the GameCube controller had an analog stick rather than just a set of buttons. It definitely allows the levels to be more intricate. In Mario 64, you really couldn't look up or down, so all the levels needed to have most of the map visible and not hide too many important details out of these set parameters. Now that we have full control, the levels have a lot more verticality to them. Like look at Tall Mountain and then look at Noki Bay. The difference is obvious. Mario 64 also had a problem where sometimes you'd want to look in a certain direction, but you're in an area that restricts camera movement. So at times it felt like you were in a constant wrestling match with a fucking Lakitu. Mario Sunshine, however, suffers from a different problem. Transitions. You see, when something happens, the game a lot of the times likes to take control of the camera and point in a direction, mostly being of a newly spawned shine, to let the player know where to go. But for whatever reason, this at times causes the camera to get stuck between the transitions, so you get movements like this where you're just constantly switching between the shine and Mario. The transitions will also cause the camera to get stuck on terrain and such. Like if you enter a certain part of the level, the camera will try to auto reposition itself to get you a better angle, but it doesn't always take into account the world around it, so it'll get stuck on a wall wall or something. It's like a dog that got its fat head stuck in between a fence. The camera in general just likes to clip through objects all the time. I think the most obvious example is back here in Pinna Park, where it's pretty much impossible not to let it go into the wall. You could tell that this experience traumatized the fuck out of the developers because they never really tried it again. In Galaxy, you have a camera on a track with very limited movement, and only rarely gives you full control in specific galaxies. In Mario 3D World, there's absolutely no control whatsoever, most likely since the multiplayer was the main focus. Like, could you imagine everyone controlling the camera? Actually, you don't need to imagine that. In the Switch port of 3D World with the Captain Toad levels, it's now in multiplayer and everyone has control of the camera.
I want to drive.
I think that's a great idea.
Wait, two people can't drive at the same time?
You're right. We should all drive.
In Mario Odyssey, you do have complete control over the camera, but they still try to avoid transitional phases as much as they can. When it does shift from one to the other, it's in between a loading screen, so they don't actually need to have a real transition. Just have a completely separate camera system depending on which loading area you've entered. What I'm trying to say is that their first attempt with a free camera was really bumpy and shaky and very nauseous-inducing, very flawed. It was a piece of shit. There's two more missions involving riding on these bloopers. One's inside this racetrack. It's the very standard get around the course in a specific amount of time. But then there's a secret shine where you had to get around the course in a very much more tighter time. A secret time. Too much of a secret if you ask me. There's actually plenty of these secret shines throughout the game. Each level has 2 of them. I actually already talked about some of them. If you re-enter a secret level, those red coin missions count as a secret shine. So one of the secret shines are always obvious, not much of a secret, and if a level has 2 secret levels, then it's not really difficult to go in and nab those. But if a level only has 1, then the other secret shine can, quite frankly, be anywhere. Sometimes you need to paint a specific part of a level that's completely hidden, or accomplish a unique task like the previously mentioned race. They're pretty interesting. Most of the time you'll come across them while searching for blue coins. At least that's how I came across many of mine. The game actually gives you very subtle yet clever hints about where these things are. Like a Gelato Beach, when you spray the ground, you'll reveal these patterns that give you blue coins. So obviously you want to spray more of the ground to see if you can find more of these things, which will eventually lead you to the secret shine. The one in Noki Bay is very similar. You can spray birds with water, which gets you coins or blue coins, whether or not they're blue or green. But the one in Noki Bay is gold, so you'll want to spray it to reveal what it is, and boom, secret shine. Another thing that I like is that many of the secret shines correlate to shines you collect in Delfino Plaza. There's a gold bird on this little island, as well as a shine on the beach that you get from spraying a pattern. It's all really clever. I like it a lot. The secret shines do kind of suffer from a similar problem as the blue coins in that many of them only appear in specific missions. Like the one in Pianta Village here, where you have to spray into the sun, it only appears in the 8th mission. But like I said, I don't think it's really too bad, since many of them you'll come across by already hunting for the blue coins. The only one that I think is complete bullshit is the previously mentioned blooper race, where you have to beat it in a very really quick time. I mean, like, it's an obvious reference to Mario 64, where you had to go down this slide faster than 21 seconds. But if you only played Sunshine, then you'd have no idea how to get it. It's not something that I feel like you could naturally come across like the others, and the things you had to do to get the required time is quite tight, like jumping over walls and shit. I can't help but feel there should have been more direction given. I imagine there were some poor kids out there looking for hours, wasting their life away. Like, they could be doing other things, like going outside, making friends, gaining social skills, and growing into a healthy adult, but now that's never gonna happen. Okay, now back to Rico Harbor, for real this time. This next mission is a return of the Gooper blooper. This mission is one of the first ones that you require a special nozzle, this one being a rocket one for Flood. Okay, that's actually not true. The 5th mission in Bianco Hills had you use it too, but I didn't use it because I just brute forced my way up there with regular Flood because I'm an idiot, sorry. The rocket nozzle can be charged up and launches you upwards a crazy distance. It's really great at just being able to bypass certain points of the level very easily. It eats up your water usage something fierce though, so you gotta make those jumps count. The other special nozzle is the turbo nozzle. This one propels Mario forward at ridiculous speeds, which can be really thrilling, but it's not as useful as the rocket one, since the game already heavily leans into vertical platforming, so there's not actually a whole lot of practical uses to make shine easier with this thing. Now early on, these nozzles are only made available in specific missions and in certain capsules. All other ones are just these holograms you can't interact with, but after you get a certain amount of shine, Shadow Mario will appear holding one of them and you gotta chase him down to get it, and then you'll be able to use it in the plaza. But it's still not unlocked in the levels. For each individual level, you have to go in to find a specific capsule that when you break open will unlock the nozzle permanently for that level and that level only. It's a bit of an annoying process and one that I didn't even fully understand until near the end of the game. You know what, I'm just going to go ahead and talk about Yoshi right now too, might as well. Don't really have anywhere else to squeeze this green bastard. You know, when I was a kid, I used to think that Yoshi and Birdo were dating, and the way that they would kiss is that Yoshi would stick his big nose into Birdo's mouth and make like a pop sound, like Okay, hold on. Let me just get my notes that I definitely wrote on a sheet of paper. Give me a sec. Okay. Yoshi sucks ass. Yeah, Yoshi does not really control all that well in this game. When moving and jumping, he's generally fine, but his flutter jump has caused me a lot of problems. When Yoshi flutters, he's mostly locked into one direction, so if you're slightly off of your trajectory, you can't really control it, causing you to plummet to your death. That happened to me on the 100 coin mission in Pianta Village. I headed over to the shrine, I jumped up to get it, and overshot it, causing me to careen off a cliff. Another thing about Yoshi is that unlike his other appearances where when you flutter he loses all momentum, here you keep it all. You're able to make pretty far distances with it. On paper this sounds interesting. It gives Yoshi something that Flood does not, since when you're using Flood to hover you slow down to a crawl. So this could potentially lead to some very interesting and unique platforming with Yoshi. But almost all the missions that require Yoshi instead have you do incredibly tight platforming. Honestly, some of my least favorite missions involve Yoshi. Episode 8 on Rico Harbor is the perfect example of everything wrong with this guy. First, you need to get him with the right fruit, since Yoshi won't come out of his egg unless you bring him what he wants, the picky bitch. So you ground pound these two machines a bunch of times until you get the fruit you want. Then you need to use Yoshi's juices to turn these fish into platforms. Just roll with it. Just slowly travel over to this area to make your way up to this cage, but don't fall, because if you do, you'll fall in the water and Yoshi will dissolve. Not only that, but these platforms seemingly travel in random directions, making getting to the cage absolutely impossible. You had to jump over here to this cliffside, eat a different fruit, and then turn the fish into a platform, because the kind of fruit Yoshi eats influences which directions the platforms travel in. What is the correlation between a pineapple and ascension? Is this how Jesus rose into heaven, had a pineapple in hand? I was always under the assumption that Jesus used the wet nut glitch. As far as I know, there's nothing in the game that tells you this, and if it does, it doesn't make it obvious. It fails to communicate with the player, whether it's through tutorials or just through game design. I mean, that's what they're trying to do here. You start far away from the shine, so when you turn this enemy into a platform and it starts moving, you can figure out that you can use the rest of the fish similarly. The first platform you land on is next to a cliff on a tree, so maybe they figured players would want to refill their juice before continuing. But I sure didn't. It's not even really in an obvious spot. Quite frankly, they should have just put the fruit on the platform directly. I imagine many players would just eat it instinctually, because who could resist a good pineapple sitting on a metal beam out in the hot sun? And then when they do that, they discover that the platforms move in different directions after consuming the fruit, making this whole thing way less frustrating to figure out. But as I mentioned, even if this was explained properly, controlling Yoshi to jump onto small platforms is just not fun and super easy to mess up. He's also kind of redundant. I already mentioned that they don't use his flutter in any kind of unique way, so why is Yoshi even here at all? The developers were clearly aware of this too, because most of the time when Yoshi is needed, it's not because of his unique abilities or necessity to reach a certain location, it's because there's this weird goop that only Yoshi can clear, forcing you to use him. The most infamous example is the boat ride here. Under normal circumstances, it's super easy to get over there, but there's goop here, and Yoshi can't fucking swim because you have to take this slow ass boat all the way over here, just sitting and waiting. Not only is this mission boring as fuck, but it really doesn't use Yoshi's ability in any unique way. You don't shoot your juices at anything to turn stuff into platforms. Nothing that uses his flutter ability. No, you're just using Yoshi because it's the only way the game can get you to do this mission in this way. So in that sense, Yoshi's not even a helpful tool. He's just being used to purposefully make something harder because of his restrictions. It's horseshit. Anyway, Gelato Beach. We're 45 minutes into this and I'm only getting to the third level of the game. Jesus Christ. Gelato Beach starts off with a secret level. I thought it was weird at first, but the way you unlock the level requires you to spray these little plants, which cause sand formations to appear. They don't do much now, but they become important later down the line when you have to take out the Wiggler enemy in a later mission. It's a very clever way to tie these two things together, early on teaching you how to take this Wiggler thing down for a later mission, while the mission itself still being fun and interesting. It's pretty neat. Many of them are more focused on completing a specific task rather than trying to reach a certain part of the level. Like this mission requires you to ground pound these panels to get the cataquacks off so you can burn the Wiggler. The Wiggler boss fight's all about using those sand formations I talked about earlier to knock him over and sit on him. And then you have like the sandbird and the watermelon ones. These are the most infamous missions in the game, and honestly, I don't know why. The sandbird has all like the red coins on it. You just gotta take it slow so you don't fall off. It tilts at one point, but you just gotta like get on the neck. Aside from that, you're mostly just kind of waiting around until it reaches the top. Is this the same area as like the Mario 64 level? It looks similar. The watermelon, it's kind of the same thing. You just gotta spray the cataquacks and then stomp them to make sure they know their fucking place. But you know, maybe that's why people hate them so much. It's not that they're really hard, but they're so slow. If you mess up, you gotta start all over and go through the same sluggish bullshit all over again. They aren't the most exciting missions in the world. Like maybe they could have had the Sandbird like weave its way through some tall formations and you have to constantly dodge them. Maybe for the watermelon one, they could go into the code and delta it all. What the fuck did I write? Well, I think that would make it better, whatever kind of cryptic bullshit I was trying to convey to my future self. The game does suffer from missions where it's just mostly going slow and being repetitive. The boat in Delfino Plaza is probably the most obvious example, just waiting around. Sirena Beach has a moment in the casino where you're just standing and spraying the slot machines over and over and over again until you get all sevens. It definitely seems like these moments were just kind of ideas developers threw at the wall and didn't really have time to fix them up or make them interesting. Like everyone's first idea for a mission was just what was put into the game, because they got 3 more months to finish it and Nintendo won't let them out of the basement until they do. Don't take this the wrong way though, these missions are pretty uncommon. It's just that they really stand out compared to a lot of the other ones in the game, which are like all unique and engaging. It's like when you're going for a nice job, you're having a good time, but suddenly you just smash your face into a metal pole. Like the rest of the run was fine, but that pole thing is really going to be what sticks out in your mind after everything, even if it was just for a moment. It really takes you off guard. It's best to try to avoid having stinker missions like this, because unfortunately, the way the brain works, the negative aspects really stick out more than the positives. Honestly, it probably would have been better if they just cut the missions out entirely. I know that wouldn't make 120 shines, but it's not like the game needs that many. They're already struggling with the length. I don't see why they couldn't just have cut these out. Pinna Park. I think out of all the levels, this one's probably my least favorite. There's some missions where you ride the roller coaster, but there's no aiming reticle and the rocket kind of fires in slightly different directions, so it's not consistent. You're going in loop-de-loops, turning sharp corners. One of the developers must have really hated people with motion sickness. Like someone threw up on his shoes and it really pissed him off. Paid like 50,000 yens for those things. It's really just awkward to maneuver around a lot of this stuff, and the platforming is probably the weakest here altogether. Like back here with the grates, like I already made a whole segment of how bad the camera can be, and this spot is probably when the camera's at its absolute worst in the entire game. It will just not cooperate with you back here. Many of the shines just generally feel forced. 2 of the missions don't even take place in the park, they're just kind of outside of it. Like imagine going to like a real theme park, but then just hanging out on the outside wall. Like you're just too cool for that stuff. Meanwhile, your friends are inside having a blast without you. It's unfortunate because I think a theme park is a great setting for a level, but the way it's implemented here just makes it feel like it's a massive missed opportunity. Next up is Sirena Beach, which is my favorite level in the whole game. It's like a complete inverse of Pinna Park. It takes place in a hotel, and almost all the missions take advantage of that theme in creative and unique ways. The first mission has you fighting against a giant manta ray, you know, as you do at a hotel. This level is kind of another infamous one, but unlike the Sandbird and Watermelon, where the slowness makes replaying them frustrating, so I understand why people dislike them, here I have no clue what people's beef is. You just have to hover over it until it breaks, and then when they all turn purple, just head to the beach and run circles as they approach. These little bastards can't do shit to you. It's certainly a unique fight. It's almost like you're fighting against something you can't really touch, like a shadow, but if that shadow like really hated water, like a cat. There's another mission that takes place on the beach where you have to clean up this electric goop within the time limit. You know, I just realized at the beginning of the game, the sludge that's like all over the place becomes very scarce, which is quite odd. Like the whole premise is for you to clean the beach. That's what you were sentenced to do after going to jail. You'd think it'd be more involved with how some of these missions are structured. And then you have the missions inside the hotel where you have to explore it very thoroughly. It's all really clever. I like how the rooms are all set up like mini puzzles. When you enter one, you have to figure out how to get out through another means, and then just keep hopping from room to room to room until eventually you get all the red coins or find the shine you're looking for. I like it a lot. Probably one of my favorite missions of the whole game. Then you have this other one where you have to navigate in the vents like it's a maze. Well, I mean, it's shaped like a maze, but since you have a bird's eye view, it's not like you're gonna get lost. Imagine if Jack Shepherd had like cell service. There's 2 missions that take place in the casino. I know I already talked about the secret missions, and I also brought this up when I was talking about like missions being slow in general. It's the one with the slot machines and the tiles. I don't really want to repeat myself, so I'm just gonna quickly show this mission in a fast forward manner of me getting through it just to hammer in just how long this took. And then one of the final missions had you face against King Boo, who just got completely fucked up. This boss fight is the weirdest one in the game. You have to ground pound these 3 pink tiles on the roulette wheel, and when you do, King Boo will roll a slot machine. It'll land on something random. Sometimes it's booze, sometimes it's coins, sometimes it's just nothing and he throws spit bubbles at you, and then sometimes it's fruit. When it lands on the fruit, you gotta find the chili pepper and throw it into its mouth. This is a very weak boss fight if I'm being honest. Nothing about it is really intuitive or easy to figure out. Like they try to set it up like beforehand where you have to ground pound a purple tile before the fight starts, parts, but there still isn't a direct correlation between ground pounding the tiles and him rolling the slot machine. And then him actually rolling the slot machine is just complete random chance, which is rarely fun. Like, imagine playing soccer, but when you score a goal, rather than getting a point, they flip a coin, and if it lands on tails, you just get punched in the face. And finally, when you do get the fruit, you have to throw the right one, being the chili pepper. This fight seems like it was put together where the solutions was obvious to the developers, but to the common player, trial and error is going to be their only friend. And not even like a good friend, it's the one that makes you pay for shit all the time. Like, I'm sure they thought King Boo sticking his tongue out will make it obvious that the player needs to throw the pepper, because tongue plus pepper equals dying. But in practice, it doesn't really work out like that. When I first saw King Boo's tongue, I didn't think, yo, I gotta throw a pepper on that. I thought, damn, this motherfucker be horny. The chili pepper also doesn't really act differently at any other point in the game. It's just like every other fruit. It's only for this fight where it has a different property, at least as far as I know. I remember when I got the fruit the first time with the roulette, I chucked a random mango and he just ate it, and I was like,
well, I've done all I can do.
The boss fight itself is also just really long and boring. Like, King Boo himself doesn't even really do anything. He just stands there looking at you run in circles. Like, why is he even at a casino? Is he gambling? Doesn't he have to, like, pay alimony? Okay, well, aside from the secret mission and this boss fight, it's overall a great level. I just really enjoy the aesthetics of it all. It's a calming hotel, a place to relax. You have a casino, a sauna, a food bar. It's all just really nice. Hello children. Before moving on, let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, there was a person named Nit-Pick. That's what's on his birth certificate. He was recording Mario's Sunshine for a video. Now, as per norm, when recording, he doesn't save his progress, just in case something goes wrong so he can redo anything if it was lost. Now, at this point, he was playing one of the secret levels, and he lost all his lives and got a game over. When he booted up the save file, he discovered something horrifying. If you don't save and you get a game over, you lose all your progress up to your last save. I had been saving for almost 2 hours. 20 shines, all down the drain. I hate lives. I'm shocked it took Mario so long to get rid of them. It's just one of those things that stuck around for the longest time, since they were always there and no one really questioned it until they got a game over and lost 2 hours of progress, and then you start questioning life itself. Now, I realize I'm a unique case. I imagine most people save their progress at every opportunity they get, but honestly, it's still kind of the same problem, but just in the opposite direction. If there's no real difference between just losing a life and getting a game over, aside from maybe taking a little longer to get back into the games as you get booted to the title screen, the whole thing just becomes redundant and pointless. It makes finding one-ups not very rewarding, since under normal circumstances, there's no consequences to getting a game over, especially if you're a person who saves after every little thing, like someone with a hero complex. Hell, even the developers knew this, because there's times where they put a one-up at the start of levels before a difficult challenge, but because they know people will die a lot and they don't want to be bothered by a dumb game over screen. Game overs and lives are just here because they felt obligated, not for any real game design reason. Well, anyway, let's move on to Noki Bay. Noki Bay is the most vertical level in the entire game, and all the missions require you to either travel really high up or deep underwater. You'll be scaling the mountain a lot, but you'll be doing it in different ways each time. Like in one, you'll take the right side of the mountain where you jump over cliffs and gaps. The secret mission will have you climb these tight ropes all the way to the top of this shell. The Gooper Blooper Returns one will have you navigating this wall maze. It's basically just a better version of Tall Tall Mountain. It's the same idea, climb a mountain, but there's a lot more variety here, so it doesn't get tedious. There's a couple of missions where rather than going up, God decides that you're not good enough and you end up going down into hell instead. The most prominent being where you had to descend deep into this water area and clean the eel's teeth. It's a little awkward being underwater and all and trying to use flood to clean these things' teeth. You gotta spray its teeth with flood, but when you spray you move upward, so it's really hard to aim sometimes. It's just kind of jank as hell, and hell's full of jank. Demons fucking clipping through floors and shit down there. Although I have said this before and I will say it again, it's the worst level to hunt for blue coins. Since this level is so tall, there really isn't a good spot to get a view of the landscape, making it hard to remember where you've already looked, and having to re-climb and scale the mountain just to search for these things kinda does turn it into Tall Tall Mountain. It's not fun. Pianta Village is the last traditional level in the game. It's kind of set up similarly to Gelato Beach, where you're more focused on completing certain tasks rather than reaching a certain part of the level. The way the level's laid out though is kind of weird. It's just kind of a square. It's called a village, but there aren't any houses. It even has less houses than Bianco Hills. Maybe the house market just crashed. Like, literally. It's set up like this because, like I said, it's more focused on completing tasks rather than obstacles. Like careening these chomps into the river to get them to calm down, hauling this giant-ass chomp to get into this water to help it calm down, help clean the fire goo off the citizens, things like that. The only one that's kind of set up like in a traditional obstacle course way is the one where the town is on fire, and you have to make your way underneath to get flood. It's interesting because it's the only regular mission that's not a secret level where flood is taken from you. You know, it just kind of hit me. How does Mario normally get flood back after Shadow Mario takes it? Does he just give him back? Is he like living on the honor system? Or does Mario just like beat the shit out of him with like a lead pipe? Well, it's a very nerve-wracking mission. You're constantly hanging over a bottomless pit on these rails. And like I said a long time ago, the buttons change when you're hanging on a ceiling or clinging to a wall, so you're always at risk of just falling and dying. And after you get all those missions done, it comes to a head in the final one. It's an 8-rig coin mission, but it's very relaxing. It's just these Piantas having a festival and enjoying life. Since it's the final traditional mission in the game, I think it's nice that it ends on such a celebratory note before entering the gateway to hell. And that's it. That's all the levels. We're entering the end game now. Literally, Corona Mountain is all that's left. This is the general final gauntlet. It takes what you learn throughout the game, puts it together in one final challenge. Unfortunately, this gauntlet has been suffering from seasonal budget cuts because it's pretty underwhelming. You start off by using Flood to put out these fires on these pedestals and time your jump so you don't get stabbed in the butt. After you make it through that, you have to go on this boat and slowly make your way through the lava pool. And if you nudge something even slightly, the thing just decides to fucking kill itself. Like, it just gives up after that. And then in the final section, you use the rocket nozzle to launch up before reaching Bowser. This isn't good. It technically does what it sets out to do. You utilize Flood in multiple ways that were used throughout the game, spraying, hovering, maneuvering, but it's so simplistic. Like, there's zero variety or creativity in how this level is set up. Like, look at just any other Mario game and you'll see how they incorporate plenty of different types of obstacles throughout the final challenge. Like Mario 64, like all these elements really pushes your moveset to the limit. Mario Galaxy takes plenty of the game's unique level design gimmicks and puts it all together. Corona Mountain just kinda does the bare minimum. Hell, it doesn't even really do that. The turbo nozzle doesn't get used at all. It wasn't invited. And the whole boat section is just tedious. One, spraying water to move an object was not exactly the most prominent feature throughout the game. It was mostly optional. They probably put it here because it's what uses like the spray nozzle the most heavily, which is what they wanted for the final challenge. But if that's the case, why not just make it where you need to clean paint or something? That's the game's whole gimmick. And this final challenge and the Bowser fight don't use it at all. It really feels very hastily put together, which considering this game's development, it probably was. The final Bowser fight isn't much better. You just have to run around these protruding segments and use the rocket nozzle to launch yourself into orbit and then ground pound to break these things. To note, the fireball ground pound is only required one time in the entire game, and it's for an optional shine in Delfino Plaza. Was this mechanic planned to be used more often? Like, were there going to be more missions that required you to use this? I think Noki Bay could have used some missions like that. Even if it was, it's still such an odd way for the fight to go. Why not spray Bowser in the face? It would have tied back to the very first fight we did. I wouldn't be surprised if a kid got stuck at this part since the game doesn't really make it obvious on what to do. It just doesn't teach it to you properly. It makes the ending feel very underwhelming, like it just kind of happens. Well, that was a bit of a lame note to end on, so I decided to end this much more positively. Let's talk about Delfino Plaza. I know it seems a little weird to put it at the end, but honestly I couldn't find a good spot to put it, so I decided why not just put it here. Yeah, I could have talked about it after talking about the controls, but Delfino Plaza is the hub that connects all the levels together. I really enjoy it. It's much smaller than Peach's Castle from the previous games, which makes it easier to travel from level to level. It also has plenty of Piantas to talk to, making it feel much more lived in and not just an empty wasteland made out of polygons. It is a little inconsistent with its level entries though. The first three you just enter through some paint on the wall, kind of similar to the paintings in Mario 64. But then you got the rest of them. Two of them you enter a pipe, one of them being very out of the way, on the top of this shrine building, the Shine Shrine. One you have to shoot out of this cannon, and this other one you have to look up at the sun. That was a secret level in Mario 64. Why did they make that a normal entry here? Mario 64 had unique level entries, but a lot of the levels were completely optional. You didn't have to go to every level to be able to beat the game, but here in Mario Sunshine, you do. And even in Mario 64, while some of them can be hidden, the entrance is still generally consistent, or at least very obvious. Like Hazy Maze Cave, you just jump into a pool that's in its own dedicated room. It's not like there's much options here. What are you gonna do, stare at it? Skip rocks? I'm making this a little bit of a bigger deal than it actually is. Like, once you find the level, then like whatever, just go to it. Stop being a bitch. It's just kind of weird. Like, it starts off with consistent entry points, and then they just went, fuck it, and burned your retinas. It's also home to plenty of its own shine sprites. Many of them are pretty simple, using the mechanics and different flood types to get access to shines, like one that requires the turbo nozzle to break through here, or the rocket nozzle to reach really high in the sky. It's all really clever. They force you to use these different mechanics introduced throughout the game, and it helps encourage you to use them uniquely in the levels. The one exception being Yoshi. Everyone knows this one, and I've talked about it a couple times already. How you have to ride these boats and all you do is just sit there as you stare at Yoshi's ass while your eyesight is worsening by looking at the screen, just to miss a jump and start all over. It's terrible. It doesn't use Yoshi's abilities in any unique way. Not the hover, not his eating. The only reason we use Yoshi is because the entrance is covered in that Yoshi-specific goop. I played this segment for almost like 30 minutes, and at one point I finally made it to the final boat after so many attempts, turned away to take a note, and I heard Yoshi die die all of a sudden. I turned back just to see Mario in the water and the boat leaving without me. I stopped the recording immediately to check what happened. I was greeted with this. After that point, I snapped. I just did the glitch where you walk on the ocean floor, much less stressful. I have to wonder what the thought process is behind this one. They had people playtest this, right? Were people cheering in the room when the boat traveled? Everyone just huddled around the TV, like congratulating each other when they finally make it, got the champagne and like celebrated. And it doesn't end there. The mission itself that you enter is of course one of the hardest ones in the game, having to ride this leaf in water that kills you, trying to collect red coins. This is the worst shine in the entire game. I hated this one. Gave me heart palpitations. This pachinko machine is also kind of infamous, mostly because it has weird hit detection and how time consuming it can be trying to squeeze in these holes. And if you miss, you have to try again. I'm lucky I got this on my second try, but those are more of the exceptions here in Delfino Plaza. All the other ones are pretty fun, like this turbo mission. I like breaking these crates as well. They're challenging, but they don't make me want to cut myself. They're very good. I also just love how alive this place feels. The game in general is just more alive. I already mentioned that, but Delfino Plaza is where it's the most apparent. You actually have like locals that you can interact and help out with. They have their own jobs and do things. Like you have this cute little shopping center here where the people are trying to sell fruit and you could just steal from them as they watch. They can't chase you down with those fat little legs. You have a canal with these boats floating around, a homeless guy. It has it all. I really enjoyed looking around this place. It's so cozy. Such a glow up from Mario 64. One of my favorite hub worlds. I love it. Right, okay, so we've reached the conclusion. The conclusion. Yeah. I've had a very hard time writing the ending for this video. I've rewritten it plenty of times trying to find a way to gather all my thoughts. Like originally I was going to use the comment about how alive Delfino Plaza was and make a big deal about how despite the game's flaws, it had life and was welcoming and shit, but it was very forced and felt a little disingenuous. Then I tried coming at it with the perspective that while it was good, it was the first mainline Mario game that really didn't push any boundaries. I was gonna like compare like the cutscenes with something like Jak and Daxter and show how more technically impressive it was. It came out a year prior. Mario Sunshine was lagging behind. But that also didn't work because like I never played Jak and Daxter, so that just kind of fed into the whole like disingenuous thing. Like looking at it, yeah, it's obvious that's technically impressive, but I still never played the game, which I feel like is an important aspect. After struggling for a while, I decided to go back and rewatch many of the parts of the video I had completed up to this point. And once I did, I finally realized something. I don't really like this game. You know Sonic Adventure 2? When I initially played it, I didn't like it. Had a lot of flaws and stuff, and I just didn't find many of the levels fun. But when I replayed it and thought more about it critically, I came around to it, and now it's one of my favorite 3D platformers. Mario Sunshine's like the complete inverse of that. Like, oh, it's flawed, but it still has its strengths and new ideas, and it's fun. But as I was watching like all the footage I had, I realized how many times when I brought up something positive, there'd always be a catch. Something could pull it down, an asterisk. But you know, now I think about it, a lot of my major problems with this game are also optional side stuff. Like 50% of the game has issues attached to it, but 85% of that 50% is stuff you don't even have to bother with. To beat the game, you just gotta play the 7 main missions for each level, which allows access to the final area. You only need 50 shines out of the 120. That's less than half the game right there. It's very interesting. On the one hand, being optional doesn't really excuse the problems they have, but on the other hand, there is a way to play the game and have an enjoyable time. You just have to not really worry about the extra stuff. This is probably why there's such a great divide when it comes to opinions on this game. If you're someone who goes out of the way to see everything a game has to offer, you're not going to be happy when the game hands you a pile of shit with slightly burnt toast on the side. Like it's a biting it too, like what the fuck? Meanwhile, if you're just someone who plays a game to get to the end, you're going to have a much better experience. You'll skip out on the blue coins, the 100 coin missions, the leaf, the pachinko machine, and so on. It's all about your approach. Still, it's overall to have all your side stuff still be fun to play so that everyone, no matter what their playstyle, can have fun. But I just kind of find it interesting how the perspective of a person and the way they play their game can affect one's opinions. It's probably why I had such difficulty writing this ending. You know, you can't really all encompass it into one final neat bow that'll cover all bases because everyone's different and everyone experiences things in their own way. And this review is just how I experienced it. It's very interesting. You know what? I feel like this is a very natural stopping point here, and I'm glad. I actually had another ending where I was just like, this game's shit, and just ended the video there.